Thank you, Professor Pant. I would like to start off with a message which I received just before our lunch break from my spiritual master, and I believe it will be very appropriate for my colleagues and friends from Australia. A bird on a tree will never be afraid of the shaking branches because the bird trusts not the branches but its own wings. Believe in yourself. Every challenge India offers us is actually an opportunity for all of us from Australia. Well, we have been working in India since September 2011, and we launched our Australian vocational education services in July last year at a glittering function in Connemara, Chennai, and was attended by the Consulate General of Australia for South India, as well as the Australian Trade Commissioner. Over the last 18 months, we have developed a successful business model and are currently working with Indian partners, schools, colleges, and private institutions in Tamil Nadu, Rajasthan, and Gujarat, offering students an opportunity to pursue courses from Certificate 1, 2, 3, 4, and Diploma in retail, business, banking, financial services, workplace health and safety, besides training and assessment. Now, we have also been working closely with Professor Mantha of AICTE, and we have understood what NVEQF is, and we are now in a position to help our Indian partners set up community colleges, which in turn could help possibly the 20 million school dropouts and help put them back into mainstream education. The key to our success is our presence in India on a almost continuous basis, affordable cost, and of course, patience. We are open to partnering with other RTOs as well as states for expanding our scope in India, and we look forward to working together with CII, NSDC, the sector skill councils, and of course with AICT and CBSE as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ravi. May I now request Mr. Quentin Stevenson Perks. He is the Assistant General Manager with International Education Austrade, and he's going to talk about the case study of models of best practice VET delivery in India and Austrade report. Mr. Quentin.
Thank you very much, Professor Punt, and it's a great pleasure to be here. I'm normally based in Canberra, but the Australian Trade Commission is represented at the Australian High Commission, and Tom Calder heads up our education team. Tom's here today for a large number of his team members. It's interesting reflecting on Australia's relationship in trade. A lot of it's made up in gold and coal, but reflecting the changes that we're seeing here throughout the whole Indian economy, increasingly services are becoming an important part of the relationship, and there's no higher priority than education. We're seeing a major shift in terms of our work here at the Australian Trade Commission in India. Supporting the recruitment activities of the Australian institutions who market here in India for students to study in Australia is continuing to be very strong. But increasingly there's much heightened interest from Australians to access the training opportunities which are undoubtedly here in India. I think we've seen about a doubling of the number of education clients coming through our door over the last 2 or 3 years. One of the things, if you feel slightly down about the challenges that India faces, we did a survey in ASEAN of six markets in ASEAN, 60 major employers across the auto, mining, hospitality and construction areas. All of them reported skill shortages, all of them were facing challenges around training, and not just in technical skills but so-called soft skills around leadership, teamwork, English language skills, etc. So this is truly a global issue which will be facing in the 21st century, and India is well placed with its demographic sort of dividend to meet those challenges. But unless the training system is here in India, the demographic dividend, so-called, will become a handbrake on the development of the economy here. So part of the work we've been doing here, and here's the advertisement. So we did some research. It's a wonderful thing. This is an Australian government report, which is about 20 pages long, so it's a good seller. But it was looking at 3 different providers and different models, and it looked at some of the challenges that they faced and some of the reasons for false steps in the early part and some of the reasons why early expectations have been changed and new models have been adapted to reflect India. Some of the common reasons for not failure but stuttering steps in the first hand was choosing a pricing model for their training which was out of step with the local market. In other words, it was too high. I think we've all accepted that the training model in India has to be based around a low-cost model but high volume, and that's one of the challenges for Australia in terms of quality standards at a low cost with a high volume turn through. Also choosing sectors where there's a low demand, notwithstanding the skill shortages in many sectors. In some sectors the demand just isn't there. Not demonstrating the return on investment, and I think this is one of the market forces that will drive change here in India, is that students and their parents will be seeking a return on their investment for the training programs that will be delivered. In other words, a better salary, a job at the end of the day. And the last reason, I think, and it was interesting hearing Ravi there, a lack of local presence. Fly in, fly out. It works in some professions, especially in the mining sector in Australia. But having a local presence here in India, I think, is seen as crucial. And I'm very keen to hear from the next speaker, Sue, who I've challenged already on some of her experiences, because that was one of the reasons, I think, for her success. Putting that to one final comments on this report, it was interesting reading it because it again identified it was a low-cost model which would be successful here in India, but it also demonstrated how original expectations have changed and adapted to local circumstances. And I think from our perspective, I think we will see not just one model which is suitable for India, but many models. And we've already heard about the demand for skills, demand for competencies, but also qualifications. And there'll be a mix of models adapted to meet those 3 different forms of outcomes for the students. I think our challenge, if I was reading our report, was that we've got a number of different models which are successful. Many of them are relatively low scale. So our challenge, I think, is to say, go from training 100 people to 100,000, because that's I think 39,000 trainers, Neil, means 100 trainers a day continuously, and that's just a volume which is extraordinary. So that's the challenge for India, is to go from 100,000 to 100,000. So on that particular note, I'm now going to segue over to Sue Freeman, and I'll be all ears for her presentation. Thank you very much, Professor Pant.
Thank you, Mr. Quentin. We have 3 more panelists with us, and we have about 15 minutes more for presentation. So exactly 5 minutes for each of the 3 speakers, I would request, so that we can have some question answers, because there can be many questions on the report, different models, the low-cost model which he has proposed. So now, may I now request Ms. Sue Freeman. She is the director with Australian Retail College, for her views.